So, The Passion of the Christ. What a fun movie. A 2-hour-long torture-fest, torture-slog depiction of a charismatic figurehead getting painfully tormented for the sake of us puny humans. Fun! But if you look back at the past 40 years of Optimus Prime, I mean, all you gotta do is swap out a couple Roman soldiers for Michael Bay, Simon Furman, and Lorenzo di Bonaventura, and we're not far off. They have put this guy through all sorts. Brace yourselves, Optimus fans. This is gonna get rough, because I'm gonna be talking about times he's been hunted for sport, ripped apart, betrayed by friends, tied to a nuke, blasted out the top of a volcano, straight into another volcano. No, I made that up. Brainwashed, miniaturized, he's had his corpse desecrated, whatever's going on here, and he's had cancer. Not that that would stop. You will not believe some of the stuff in this video. So please hit like on it, subscribe if you're new, let's just get into it. Oh, and this wasn't an afterthought at all, but while we're at it, let's try and figure out how many times he's died across the continuity. So count up all the deaths as we go, and let's see if you get the same total as me at the end of the vid. Right, where to start? Now, I find the Marvel continuity to be one of the cruelest to Optimus, but I'll start you out easy, and the time that he couldn't control his troops, which resulted in Sparkplug Witwicky having a heart attack. Yeah, so this argument amongst the troops escalated to the point that Jazz went apeshit with a flamethrower, and as you can probably imagine, it was all too much for the old boy, and his ticker done stopped ticking. Why was this bad for Prime, you ask? Well, these were his first human allies. Then later, he was defeated by Megatron, then blammoed to bits by Shockwave, then not just taken prisoner, but decapitated with his head wired into a machine that would harvest his head of all intel, as well as give him the creation matrix energies to create a whole new Decepticon army. Luckily, Prime managed to give most of the energy to Buster Witwicky, so Shockwave was only able to create 6 soldiers. And while his head was here, the Autobots remote controlled his headless body, just because it was funny, I guess? No, actually, it was to stop Grimlock from setting off a bunch of nukes. Yeah. On a semi-related side note, remember how Shockwave only had enough creation energy to create 6 spots, and not the massive army that he had hoped for? Well, that's how the Constructicons were born. Then Shockwave was like, I've had enough of this thing, and got Jetfire to throw it into a stinky swamp. The Autobots had to risk Swamp Ass to get it back. Just realized I don't actually know what Swamp Ass is. Is it actually anything to do with swamps? And when they did, they found that the block-headed Cyclops had switched the heads, so Optimus turned evil and started blasting his friends. Anyway, right before Buster Witwicky had a bunch of drills carve into his face, he managed to get mind control of Jetfire, ordered him to knock Shockwave into next week, and sent him to fetch Optimus's real head. Optimus ripped off the fake head, chucked it in the putrid lake of shit, caught his real head. Wait, recapitate? Is recapitate a word? Should be a word. And then unleashed 7 shades of ass kick on the Decepticons, and especially Shocky Baby, who ended up getting flung and sank into this open sewer. I kind of feel like this swamp was the hero of the story. Oh, and you know what? Instead of finishing the helpless mad scientist while he was helpless, he was like, actually, I've got something better to do. Yoink. Why? You saved so many people so many problems if you just finish the job right here. He made the most awkward Santa Claus ever to stop Buster from moaning about getting into the Christmas spirit, and then he got really depressed here when remembering the indignity of his decapitation and all the events that followed, questioning whether he was fit to lead at all. But when Bumblebee was captured and his severed arm got dumped in front of Autobot HQ, his crisis of confidence got kicked out of the window, and he soloed every con to step into his path, finishing off by blasting Soundwave. Yeah! Then he got a massive chunk blasted out of him by Shockwave, although that was just a dream. Then he was hit with a personality reversal signal that turned him evil just as he was doing a bunch of meet and greets in shopping malls and stuff. With loyalty well out of the window, the other Autobots had to take him down before he did something irreversible, and he nearly got executed by Jazz before that they figured out that it was all caused by this device called a PARD, made by some nefarious humans. Insecticon Bombshell put a Cerebro chip in his head. So I guess Bombshell mass shifted down to enter a tiny cut in Optimus' side. He made his way to Optimus' brain and plant this pill-shaped mini-bot, which you can see crawling around his brain module to, and I quote, take root, while it tried to find other ways to extract more precious Matrix energies. Later, he began to worry that the Autobots wouldn't survive if anything would ever happen to him. This was after they failed a bunch of simulations or tests or whatever. So he and Wheeljack came up with this plot to first fake his death using a fake duplicate of himself. And oh my god, look at this carnage. He's been ripped in half. Both arms are off. His pinky finger and his ring finger have been cut off. While he went back to Cybertron to see what state the place was in. So anyway, the duplicate gets ripped to pieces, leaving the troops to fend for themselves, while the real Optimus gets arrested by Ultra Magnus on Cybertron, who thought he was arresting the fake one. Oh my god, they're gonna have him face the firing squad. Long story short, his friend Outback helped him escape before getting severely injured in the process. And as he lay dying in Optimus's arms, Optimus was like, "Time for a story." And out of all the amazing stories that he could have chosen to tell at this point, he chose the one where he nearly got killed by robo-monkeys. So yeah, this was a time that he, Ratchet, and Prowl got accidentally transported to this planet. It's never really explained how they got there, they're just suddenly there. They get roped into helping this race called the Chloran, who were being subjugated and brutalized by these evil techno-organic apes and their leader, Xenag. And basically Xenag ripped a chunk out of Optimus's midriff, donkey punched him, and he's about to kill him when everything starts disappearing around them. And it turns out that they were floating in limbo the whole time and were experiencing a vision induced by a parasitic organism that had attached to their heads and were feeding on all the negative emotion. Now, shouldn't we remove these from the list? You know, if they were just an illusion and didn't really happen, I mean. Well, no, because Optimus still had damage from the illusion, and they theorized that it somehow manifested in reality. Anyway, this frankly batshit tangent story raised Outback's spirits enough to keep him alive, and Optimus eventually managed to persuade the Wreckers that he was the real Prime. Then returned to Earth to witness his own funeral, leaving the Earth Autobots, and me, actually scratching our heads going, what the f*** was that all about? This whole thing actually reminds me of those flashbacks from Arrested Development where the dad would engineer all these elaborate life lessons. Like, I can't remember exactly, but like one day the kids would just be walking down the street and some guy gets decapitated right in front of them. And the kids are standing there like, oh my god! And then the decapitated body stands up and goes, and that's why you always brush your teeth. Okay, let's see what other horrors Marvel's got in store for us. How about the time he and Megatron went into a video game to fight each other, where the loser would get their body detonated in real life? Optimus won. But of course, Megatron cheated, and boom! Thing is, he thought they'd lost fairly, so when the guy holding the detonator was like, no, I'm not gonna kill you, OP was like, rules be rules, press the button. I mean, if anyone could out-Jesus, is this guy. Luckily, his mind was backed up on a floppy disk. But unluckily, Ratchet couldn't restore him, so his body got blasted into space, and he couldn't be restored until much later when he became a Power Master. He was pretty upset when his close friend Ratchet had to sacrifice himself to defeat Megatron. He was even more upset when he saw that he'd become fused with Megatron at the atomic level to produce this. Because of his attachment to Ratchet, he ordered that the creature not be harmed, but it went ballistic and started tearing into the Ark's vital systems, so Kup threatened to relieve Optimus of command. And finally, Ratchet's personality came through and begged for Optimus to kill it. In the end, they did manage to separate them, although that did mean releasing Megatron from whatever hole this kept him in. He lost faith in Primus when it seemed like their robo-god just wanted to use the bots as pawns in his war against UNICRON. He bonded with Scorponok, only to watch him killed by the Chaos Bringer before Robo-Jesus did his Matrix thing. Although, it did leave him massively damaged, leaving him only the time to leave Grimlock in command before he died. I don't even know where to start with this. Look at this. But he's fine. He's just a robot. He's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Here, look at the monkey. Look at the silly monkey.
Of course, he was given a new body by the mythical Last Autobot, used it to lay waste to the Decepticons, and pretty much won the war single-handedly.
You're a winner.
Later, his meeting with the president got rudely interrupted by the Insecticons, although I guess that kind of pales in comparison to, you know, shit like this. And then he was reduced to a non-transforming Action Master.
Who will give up the power to transform to become stronger, faster, more alive?
Stronger, faster, more alive. Wait, what? Give up what now? So that brings us to the Gen 2 comics, where he had a vision that showed him the fractioning of his species as a process called budding would come to create an offshoot Cybertronian race. As I'm sure you can imagine, for someone who's lived his life by the motto, till all are one, this must have been pretty traumatic. It was also problematic, because these guys were supposedly stronger, faster, and firmly under the control of the new bad guy in town, G-Axis. So he figured he'd try and team up with Megatron and the old Decepticons, only to be blasted in the back by Megzy, then beaten to an absolute pulp, his every circuit ionized, and then the Matrix ripped out of his chest to have its power siphoned. You know what? It's the little details that make these extra horrific. Like in this one, it's the hand over the mouth while he pulls the... Eventually, however, Megatron would come to understand the threat posed by the new Cybertronians and ordered his forces to join up with the Autobots. So then he took a sky sled over to G-Axis' flagship in the hopes of getting him to join up with them as well, in the face of the greater threat posed by a nefarious entity called the Swarm. But unlike Megatron, he wasn't able to persuade G-Axis, and he punched Prime so hard it ripped half of his face off. Also, he ripped his guts out, smashed him through a wall, threw him down a few floors, then tried to stomp him, and then crushed his head. The swarm then consumed G-Axis, and instead of running, Prime allowed it to take him, hoping to reason with it from within. And this is one of the most horrific things I've seen happen to Optimus. Like, it strips the layers away from his body, strips his entire limbs away, and eventually just bursts out of his eyes and face, and oh my God. Leaves him just a dismembered torso lying in a pool of his own leaking fluids. Until the power of the Matrix finally bursts through. Its glorious purifying light cleansing the swarm in the eyes of Primus the Almighty. Of course, Optimus was granted a new, more powerful body and ushered in peace and love and waffles and all that good stuff. Regeneration 1 began with Prime finding himself lost and devoid of meaning and purpose after the end of the war, and he became withdrawn from society, somewhat, sidelined from everything and everyone, until Megatron reappeared on Earth. Some annoying humies had accidentally woken him up, after which he promptly turned our own nukes upon us and lay waste to pretty much the entire planet. He was reluctant to engage with him until Megatron began taunting him with his recently acquired hostage, Cup, and his new army of lobotomized Decepticons, which even included the Autobots that had been in stasis on the Ark. So not only does he realize that his reluctance to engage allowed Megatron to lay waste to Earth, Megatron blasted Springer in the head with his fusion cannon. So Prime lost control and gave Megatron the fight that he'd desperately been after. He managed to get the better of Megatron and rip the spark out of his chest. But not before Megatron told him of his plan to set off all of Earth's nuclear weapons. Spike Witwicky, now a superhero called Circuit Smasher, managed to disable the nukes, but seeing what had happened to Earth, got really pissed off at Prime and ordered him and the remaining Autobots to leave Earth immediately. As the Autobots left Earth, Prime told Magnus that he now thought that him being resurrected by the last Autobot was a mistake and that he should have been left dead. He passed the Matrix back to Hot Rod and left to destroy the remnant Cybertronian tech on board the Ark, only to find the Ark taken off, piloted by Galvatron. Imagine having done all that and the spirit of Megatron is still alive. He had to deactivate Sideswipe in the 1986 Deadly Paradise book after the Hothead destroyed a piece of critical infrastructure called the Nova Suspension Bridge. Proud Detective Eyes, though, that it was a Decepticon that did it and cleared his name. The novel was kind of vague on whether Prime reactivated Sideswipe after, though. I mean, you'd assume so, wouldn't you? But, what if? Alright, you guys still with me? This is going to be a long bit, so there are time codes below if you want to skip ahead. But just wanted to take a sec to thank everyone for supporting the channel. All of the likes and the views and the shares and the subscribes are hugely appreciated. Let alone those of you who become members, you guys are going to get some new content coming at you later this month. Okay, moving on to G1. Now, aside from the fact that this incarnation had to hold back the enemy forces for 5 million years and exile the Autobots from their homeworld, he had to watch a Leader 1 get blowed up right in front of him. Now, she didn't die, but he didn't know that, and he had to order the Ark to take off without her. Of course, the ship crashed and he spent 4 million years in stasis. Then he got knocked off a dam, then blasted off the side of a cliff by explosives planted by his own troops. And then, after he was badly injured shielding human workers lying there with his insides exposed, Laserbeak snuck into the Autobot base and destroyed his Cosmotron component. Nobody really knows what a Cosmotron component is, but we do know that he would die without it.
Dinobots must be destroyed!
He had to order the newly created Dinobots to be destroyed when he believed them to be dangerous, before backpedaling his decision after they earned his trust, turning him back to his original colors, I guess. Megatron forced him to choose between seeing Cybertron destroyed or the Earth. Well, pretty messed up, when Megatron forced him to flip a switch that would bring Cybertron into Earth's orbit, unleashing a bunch of environmental disasters. Eventually, he managed to blow up Megatron's ship, which unleashed enough power to push Cybertron back out of orbit. He had to lift an entire oil tanker ship out of the water to frighten the Insecticons out of a lasting alliance with Megatron, and then he was forced to leave Earth when defeated by Megatron in a duel, which once again, he cheated at by assimilating the power of several other Decepticons. As he prepared to leave, he saw the Dinobots fighting the Constructicons, but said he wasn't allowed to help. I think the Dinobots probably would have had this covered, but imagine if someone weaker was getting absolutely murdered, and he still wasn't able to help. That would have been horrific. He was unable to fight back for fear of hurting young Spike when his consciousness had to be implanted in a robot body. One of the standouts for me has to be when he was dismembered by the Constructicons and rebuilt into an alligator bot that roamed the sewers. And even after he was reassembled, his arm was somehow attached to the top of the Empire State Building. Anyway, only one ep later, the cons flipped his personality again, and it took Bumblebee and his big yellow ballsack to take him down and restore his personality. Megatron made a remote control clone of him. A ceremony in his honor was ruined when this crooked politician aired a deepfake tape showing the Autobots raiding an oil refinery. And they were put on trial and once again forced to leave Earth on a rocket that was pointed straight at the sun. He had to wade through the sewers again when transported to a planet of giants.
This water is filthy.
Then he was detained, brainwashed, miniaturized, and then used as collateral by an alien gambler called Bosch. This guy arranged to have them fight in a gladiatorial arena against these mutant aliens, also he could win some Energon chips. And once he got out of that whole mess, he had to fight a bunch of mechanical plants that were previously thought to be extinct, called Morphobots. Then he got hunted for sport. This nutcase hunter called Lord Chummerly Mummerly Wummerly.
Call blimey, Governor. I left the cheese and kisses and the God forbids and the rat and mouse.
Lured him to a mock-up of Cybertron filled with traps and bizarre creatures. He even baited his traps with big boob damsels. I mean, Optimus didn't go for it though.
Drat! Outsmarted by a lorry.
Blitzwing, however, just stomped on her.
Blitzwing, no! Help!
Then there was the time he got strung up and nearly dunked in a vat of acid. Yeah, after finding that Alita was still alive, he went back to Cybertron to free her from the Decepticons, who had obviously laid a trap for him. Luckily, Alita could stop time by screaming. That's kind of handy. Yeah, I did a whole video on Cybertrons with superpowers, but yeah, that stopped him falling in and getting dissolved. Soon after that, he'd have to watch his mentor, Alpha Trion, sacrifice his life when he merged with the supercomputer Vector Sigma.
He is merged with Vector Sigma.
And then he got infected with cosmic rust to save Perceptor. Then Starscream and his Combaticons interrupted the unveiling of his statue. Oh no, they shot holes in his statue! Before he had an awesome head-on collision with Motormaster, before stealing the Combaticons' identity to go undercover and find out the deets of Megatron's latest plan. He famously died in the '86 movie, but even then there was no rest for the Big Red, as his corpse was desecrated by the Quintessons, who messed with it to create Zombie Prime, who took the Matrix from Rodimus and then tried to lure the Autobots into a trap to kill them all. Of course, the Matrix helped his real personality shine through. He gave the Matrix back before getting blown up again. After that, though, he laid in rest peacefully because his remains were gathered by these two scientists, one of whom was scarred in a battle between Opie and Megatron. What the was he, a face model before?
This freaking scar ruined my life. My wife left me. My mom said she couldn't believe what she brought into the world and I killed her.
It's a tiny scar. And the other who blamed the Cybertronians for his daughter losing the use of her legs. And together they used Prime's body as a lure to infect the Autobots with these spores that sent any Cybertronian into a full-on foaming at the mouth hate rage. And long story short, Hot Rod got his body back and Skylynx managed to find a Quintesson who could bring him back to life. Anyway, to neutralize this, which would become known as the Hate Plague and was about to get out of all control, Optimus unleashed the wisdom of the Matrix, as advised by it. Yeah, this little creature lives within the Matrix. He told them to unleash the wisdom of the Matrix. But doing that would in turn destabilize Vector Sigma, giving the cons an opportunity to return in the Japanese Headmaster series. And this is where Optimus had to merge with Vector Sigma to restore balance and save all our buttcakes. Did I say buttcakes? Oh, before he died, he was also attacked by energy leeches, as well as Roborats. Okay, let's rewind a bit and go back to the Battle of Autobot City in the '86 movie, because there was an alternate timeline that spurred off from this moment in a comic called Deviations. And I've mentioned it in vids before, it's the one where Kup stops Hot Rod from interfering in that famous battle, and Optimus kills Megatron and picks Starscream as his herald. Starscream also got the ability to combine too, and form this huge version of himself and squished Opie under his fist. Didn't flatten him though, as he looked like this in the very next panel. Then Rodimus came in and saved the day, and Opie was teleported to safety. In Unite Warriors, Roller tried to destroy his body when everyone else was trying to bring him back from the dead. We're not talking about this version of Roller though. The version we're talking about is the little drone unit that comes out of his trailer. For a bit of context, in these Japanese comics, there was this whole thing where Roller got trapped in another dimension. And while just there wandering around, he became spiteful and full of hatred for Optimus and eventually got the attention of Unicron. I guess he was just like, I like the way you hate.
against your life.
And Unicron brought him back to his own universe to work for him. So after Optimus was damaged in the battle, Ratchet was trying to rejuvenate him, but Roller saw his opportunity. Luckily, he was stopped by Skylinks though. Eventually, Vector Sigma did manage to resurrect him, but only for 7 days. But in that time, he managed to fight off Empress and her combined form Megatronia, then combined into Optimus Maximus, only to be blown apart by Unicron's eye-beams, and once the Chaos Bringer's head had been punched back into space, he set about enjoying his final few days. So he went to a baseball game, he went surfing in Hawaii on a new surfboard gifted from Marissa, and he took in the rehearsal of a play. And of course, he eventually slipped away again, with Vector Sigma explaining that it would take a power equal to that used to create the universe to bring him back again. Oh. Okay, let's do Energon Universe Optimus. The run is still ongoing, but there's a fair amount of Optimus abuse, even though we're only on about issue 7 or 8. So right after being revived on the Ark, he got hit by one of Soundwave's missiles. And look at this. You really feel the power of his rockets there, before seeing the corpse of Bumblebee that had been shot in the face. Shot by Starscream, of course, and Starscream is hateable in this comic line, man. Like later when he squashes this squishy human until he explodes.
I like the way they pop.
He then had to blast Teletran 1 to stop the cons from reviving any more of their troops, which of course meant that he couldn't bring back any of his troops either. Then he was saved by Jetfire, only for Jetfire to be mortally wounded and die in his arms. Now this was pretty gut-wrenching for those following the wider Energon universe, as we saw in issue 1 of Void Rivals how he had been revived from dormancy. His first thought, after thousands of years, was of Cybertron and his fellow Autobots, and he jetted off immediately and traveled God knows how many light years through space just for this to happen. Oh, and his last words were utterly heartbreaking as well, as he asked Prime if there was any hope. And Prime just wasn't able to give him an answer. Just lie, man. Just lie. So all that was just in the first issue. He stood on a deer in issue 2, which taught him the fragility of deer. Then in a battle against Skywarp, he got the better of the Seeker despite being flummoxed by his teleportation. And just as he was about to finish Skywarp with his Energon axe, the military shot a rocket into his arm. And Skywarp seized the opportunity repeatedly to fire into the wound. Then Skywarp turned on defenseless young Spike and was going to flick him like a bug, like this would have broken every bone in his body. So Optimus had to rip off his own arm to give him something to bludgeon Skywarp with. The way it's portrayed as well makes it seem super painful, like sometimes with the amount of brutalities in these fights, you forget that these beings are actually taking immense amounts of pain. You don't forget it here though. Then while trying to rush Spike to the hospital, he had to watch Starscream open fire on the hospital just out of spite. Being the f***ing hero that he is though, he used the power of the Matrix to fix the hospital generator so the kid could get treatment, instead of healing himself or reviving any of his comrades. A temporary solution presented itself though in Megatron's arm, that I guess they just had in a suitcase somewhere. So anyway, Optimus fixed it, and goddamn, he got a fusion cannon now! They went on the offensive and Prime found out the hard way that the cons had got Teletran 1 working again and used it to bring the Constructicons into the game. And as I said, he found out the hard way when wham! Longhaul smashed into him at breakneck speed. Then if that wasn't bad, I mean, look how horrific this panel is. Then if that wasn't bad enough, that's right, they combined into Devastator. Let's just take a second to appreciate the epicness of this guy. Like, they've done a really great job of making him terrifying. Look what the Combiner does to our guy, man. Jesus fuck Christ. Then I was like, no, we're not doing this again, are we? As he almost died. But Sparky, in an absolutely beautiful moment, entered the Matrix, I guess his life force rejuvenating it, and that made Optimus...
You got the touch.
Well, you know.
You got the power. Yeah.
Laid an unholy ass kicking onto the Combiner, ripping his finger off, going full John Woo with the fusion cannon in one hand and his ion cannon in the other, drop kicking him in the f***ing head, and then tricking him into running over a cliff. Epic. Absolutely epic. Yeah, the Skybound line is turning into something pretty special, like gorgeous artwork. They've made the cons super evil, like they've ripped Skywarp to pieces just for extra parts, and then Soundwave rips Starscream's heart out because he kicked Ravage a few issues earlier. It's got really lovely heartfelt moments and plenty of Robo Carnage. So far, loving it. Now let's go from the heights of Skybound to Kiss Players. He was in Kiss Players. That was pretty unfortunate for him. So after his death in the 86 movie and Galvatron was thrown out of Unicron's body to crash land in Tokyo and devastate the whole city, we had Kiss Players. Yay. So Prime was reborn when Marissa Fairborn kissed him, and the two teamed up and began traveling around fighting the Legion, these penis-mouthed Megatron clones, and getting a little too close for comfort. She would refer to him as her boyfriend, although he seemed to think they were just friends. And they would go on dates, and she would even wash his gas tank, and stick shifter. They even went on this mission to investigate a mysterious base called the genital system, which was only accessible via the spiral vagina. This is so fucking weird. Orion lost his faceplate in IDW. He said it was his lucky mouthplate and that he liked it because it moved when he talked. Later on, he was like, me and my big visible mouth. I thought that was quite funny. And then after he crash landed and he was sitting there all pissed off, he reached for a piece of scrap metal and I shoved it on his face, look. And went through a phase of anger and frustration while working as head of security under Zeta Prime. So much so that he beat Swindle to within an inch of his life, in front of a crowd of horrified onlookers. And it was only Bumblebee who stopped him from publicly executing him. These feelings were rooted in his doubts that whilst working under Zeta, he might not be on the right side at all. And at one point, Zeta sent Orion's unit into a mission with a very low survivability probability, hoping that they would die and give him the excuse he needed to invade the city of Kaon. And he finally saw that Zeta, a bot that he really looked up to, was corrupt when he found out that Zeta was planning to drain civilians of their life energies to power his new superweapon. He'd eventually confront Zeta, and Zeta was about to kill him, when guess who saved him? Yep, Megatron. He lost an arm, destroying Zeta's weapon, and once Megatron had dispatched Zeta, he blasted young Pax in the back again. He was nearly blown up in the Toro Axis mega refinery explosion triggered by Scorponok, more about that here, and as the ferocity of the blast awoke Trypticon, Optimus tried to take him down, first with artillery, then by showing it the Matrix in the hopes that, make it see sense. But Trypticon just stomped him and stomped him pretty good. A Decepticon called Axe had tried to kill him, but his bodyguard Ironhide threw himself in the path of the blast, and at one point, he sat down and reminisced with Megatron about how Megatron smashed his face off with his Energon mace, as well as another occasion where Megatron trapped him in an antimatter chamber. And this must have made quite a mess because Optimus said they had to stitch him back together from the blast patterns on the walls. And then at the war's zenith, Optimus sealed himself in an Omniglobe to absorb the relentless flood of data coming in from countless fronts. He had to exorcise Transformers called Demonicons that had become possessed by evil spirits, and was forced to consider destroying Cybertron to take down one of the most powerful Transformers ever, Thunderwing. Luckily, they found out that Thunderwing was rapidly burning through the super energon that was fueling him, so Optimus went in to take him on, managing to hang in there until Thunderwing exhausted his reserves. He had to fight the Avengers when Marvel's finest were hit with an aggression wave, and on top of that, the Decepticons somehow enhanced their powers by studying Spider-Man. But the Autobots used the same trick and used Iron Man's Transformer armor to augment themselves, and that allowed them to push the cons back. Another battle with Megatron saw him augment himself with Ultra Energon and punched right through OP's torso, smashing his spark casing. Megatron would have finished him off too, but OP transferred his consciousness to his trailer, making his body seem dead. Next up, he had to take on his predecessor Nova Prime, who had become inhabited by the Anti-Matrix to become Nemesis Prime. Might do a spotlight vid on Nova Prime at some point, so keep your eyes open for that. But long story short, Nova was about to kill Optimus when Galvatron turned around and killed him because he wanted the darkness within the Dark Matrix for himself. Soon after that, Megatron was ripping the Matrix out of Prime's chest again after the Autobots were defeated by Devastator in All Hail Megatron, for OP blew up in a space bridge incident which fried all of his circuits and left him in a coma, and basically left the Autobots stuck on Cybertron, having to leave Earth to the Decepticons for the foreseeable future. When they finally did get Prime repaired and back to Earth, Megatron pretty much defeated him again. But this time he was saved by Spike Witwicky's sniper blast from a rifle made with tech derived from Shockwave that knocked the wind out of Megsy and allowed Prime to muller him upside his noggin with his own fusion cannon. And then there was the whole thing about him resigning leadership after his close friend Ironhide died. So after Megatron's defeat, the Autobots decided to stay on Earth to help rebuild, so they went dark, they slipped under the radar, disappearing from the spotlight while they tried to make amends. Human sentiment turned quite hostile towards them though, and many Autobots got frustrated as they started to ask what was the point in staying on this planet where they weren't even wanted. Eventually, as a way of easing that frustration, OP let Hot Rod go on this dangerous mission to free Prowl, a mission that would go completely pear-shaped and result in Ironhide's death. Optimus was devastated and started to question every decision he'd made. He gave up leadership and eventually surrendered himself to the human outfit's Skywatch. He'd later be... Belchy. He'd later come back to fight Menasor, and even after he'd beaten the Combiner, he still refused to take command again. He did help Skywatch fight off a plague of Galvatron's zombies before being battered by Megatron again in his powerful new body. For reasons that no one understood at the time, Megatron handed himself in and goaded OP into torturing him with massive amounts of electricity from a variable voltage harness, before Optimus had to throw himself into Vector Sigma again to purify it from the dark energies that would eventually result in the largest combiner ever created, the D-Void, and stop it from destroying Cybertron to complete its emergence into our universe. Of course, this didn't kill Optimus, and he awoke to find Cybertron run down and populated with many Cybertronians that had returned from their colonies after the incident with the Devoid. Many of them didn't like each other, and many of them blamed Prime for what had happened. So when word began to spread that he had returned, things started to get pretty tense. As well as all this, he found that the Matrix was broken into 2 parts and emptied of its energies. He handed one piece to Hot Rod and the other to Bumblebee, and declared that Optimus Prime was dead, and that he, Orion Pax, for the sake of peace, would leave Cybertron once and for all. And it wasn't until a corrupted Nova Prime tried to crush his faith in the Prime lineage altogether by using the power of the dead universe to shapeshift into forms of past Primes in an effort to show him what a failure they'd all been and what a failure he was. Well, it wasn't until this moment that he found within himself the courage, the goodness, and the decency to literally fight and overcome his doubts, to rechristen himself Optimus Prime. Then, of course, he had to fight alongside Megatron to stop Shockwave collapsing all of reality into a black hole with his Regenesis ores, eventually resulting in Megatron becoming an Autobot. He got beaten by Victorion, and then tried to add Earth to the Cybertronian Council of Worlds, kind of against many of the humans' wishes, which earned him a reputation as a conqueror trying to add to his empire. Then he killed Galvatron as he was surrendering. It's a little more complicated than that, but I won't go into it too much here. Just a little weird to see RC and Soundwave's shocked faces as he plucked his head off. He got flipped arse over tit by Rom, but he did get some payback by slamming into him in truck mode. Then he got punched in the face by Pyra Magna after a disagreement over the Matrix. Then he had to oversee Sideswipe's funeral. Check out my video on RC if you want to know more about that. He tried to attack Onyx Prime when he reappeared, only to be easily swatted away. Only for Onyx to dramatically reveal that he had been, for millions of years, none other than Shockwave. Then he shot Opie through the chest and chained him to a wall, and then threw him into a black hole, so that he could experience the enlightenment that only being tossed into a black hole could bring. That shredded his physical body, but took his mind to the dimension between life and death, called infraspace. He got out of there, got himself a new body, and then dealt with Shockwave, only to find Unicron the Uncreator on approach to get his Devourer on. Prime tried to evacuate planet Alonia, but had to watch it eventually be destroyed, followed by planet Divisian. After which, Unicron set his sights on Caminus. Optimus's best plan involved allowing Unicron to eat the Camian world, so that he himself could be eaten, so that he could get inside Unicron and find a way to kill him from inside out. A plan which, unfortunately for Caminus, didn't work, as Optimus was repelled back by these creatures that lived inside him as part of his immune system. Once they'd found out about a massive WMD called the Talisman that Shockwave had planned to kill Unicron with after he wiped Cybertron's slate clean, Optimus decided to remove his mouthplate, deciding to face Unicron as himself, before he, RC, and Starscream battled their way to the black hole at Unicron's core, with Optimus eventually throwing himself in. How many black holes has this guy been in, man? Finding himself back in infraspace, Optimus found the Antillan scientist responsible for the creation of the Chaos Bringer. The Antillan beat Optimus until Soundwave managed to link Optimus with the power of the EARTHSPARK, giving Optimus the power to hold his own, persuade the Antillan to let go of all of his hatred, remember all that he had once loved, and light his darkest hour. Yay! After which Unicron began to collapse into the black hole himself. In his last moments, Optimus thought back upon his life and found at least a little solace in the fact that he'd tried to build a better universe and hoped to inspire those who followed to do the same. And then he was gone. One of my favorite versions of Optimus in one of my favorite continuities, and he got the send-off he deserved. I'm going to do a video comparing the incarnations of Optimus, like not just the designs, but the characters, because obviously there's pretty big differences between the continuities. That wasn't quite the end of IDW's Optimus though, as he did appear in a dream that Mirage had, but even in that he was getting stabbed through the chest with a pole. Alright, next up, let's do the movie version of Prime, because sometimes I do wonder if I spend enough time on the Bayverse, you know, but I do often get a real nostalgia for that era. Anyway, the first time we saw Optimus was way back in 2007 in his transition form, blasting through the atmosphere to crash land on Earth. How the hell did they get here? I mean, did they fly all the way from Cybertron in this form? Or was there some sort of mothership that blasted them out? I have seen elsewhere in the comics that these can travel quite long distances through space, but only really as a last resort. What we do know is that these are designed for more armored sections of the Transformers body on the outside of the structure to shield the more vulnerable components. As they travel along, they pick up and get coated in space dust to make them look like a naturally occurring space rock, which clearly worked like a charm, as our military clearly had no idea about their orbital entry. And then when they did make landfall, they quickly turned back into their protoform mode and begin scanning for new disguises. So first one's pretty obvious. He had to blast the life-giving Allspark into space potentially condemning his planet to a slow starvation and death. But when compared to the risk of letting it fall into Megatron's hands, knowing what he would do with that power, then the choice was clear. Of course, this is Optimus trying to buy time, and probably hope to return with the ALLSPARK and rejuvenate the planet once Megatron's threat had been neutralized. Anyway, later in Transformers 07, he had to leave Bumblebee in the custody of Sector 7 rather than engage their security forces and risk many human fatalities. And of course, he had to see Jazz ripped in half. Jazz would be resurrected in a comic set in an alternate timeline, but I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Or right now, in fact. Basically, it was Optimus who was defeated here. Megatron conquered Earth to cyberform it with the ALLSPARK. Opie got banged up and frozen in the Hoover Dam, and then had to fight Megatron, who, because he had linked with the ALLSPARK, could instantly regenerate. So Michaela and B had to infect him with the nanovirus, which would eat him from the inside out. Then they used the ALLSPARK to bring back Jazz, but it's been tainted from being bonded with Megsy, so he now evil. And then there was some shit about UNICRON in there, but you know what? This is a pretty hard comic to find, so I don't know all the details. Where the hell is Sam? Is he dead? He learned of the re-emergence of the Fallen, the resurrection of Megatron, before he was killed in a 3-on-1 beatdown. Where even in the face of those odds, Megatron had to sneak up on him before impaling and blasting his chest open, killing the Prime and sending him, once again, grey. A quest for the Matrix of Leadership ended in his rebirth though, and he had to take on Jetfire's body parts to rip faces and crush sparks. Interestingly, there was a comic where the Autobots tried to replicate this process so that Optimus could use Jetfire's parts whenever he chose. And they did manage to get it to work, although Starscream tried to steal the process for himself and used the dead bodies of dead Decepticons to give himself extra power and make a play to become all-out leader of the cons. It ended with Ratchet blasting him with a scrambler weapon that burned out Starscream's new cybergenetic sequencing, rendering him unable to combine. And Optimus, seeing that he nearly gifted some savagely destructive tech to the enemy, shunned the process, vowing that fortitude and valor would be the only weapons he relied on from then on. In the Revenge of the Fallen comic, it would detail how he was hidden away from the Fallen to protect him, and as the last surviving Prime, he was in effect orphaned when the other Primes were killed. Of course, he had to grow up not knowing who he was and having no inkling of his heritage or destiny. He was found by Sentinel Prime and joined his tribe, as they were described at the time, called the Autobots. And later he was arrested by Prowl for treason, on the orders of Megatron, of course, who planned to ambush them and make Optimus disappear, if you know what I mean. Then after Starscream blew up Sentinel's ark, Optimus became enraged and declared that he was going on a suicide mission to kill Megatron in retaliation. He had to fight a contingent of brainwashed Autobots, including Armorhide, Blazemaster Brawn, and Smokescreen, before having to watch Elita 1 crushed to death by Shockwave right in front of him. Say it with me, there's Satan, then there's Shockwave. Incensed, he threw himself at Shockwave, but he was denied his revenge when the Driller saved him. Then after fighting Shockwave and the Driller on Earth, he found out about the crashed Ark and Sentinel on board it. We all know how that turned out, and Optimus and the bots were exiled into space by the humans, who just wanted to save their planet, I guess, but went about it in a pretty annoying way.
President calls me every day because I'm so important.
Do you know how many people I got following me around all day? Sometimes I just walk in a circle all morning and they have to follow me everywhere because I'm so important. Also, my dad is the president, is the king of France because I'm really important. I can't have you put to death.
Luckily, Optimus saw what was coming and had to hide his men in the booster part of the rocket, which fell back to Earth before Starscream blew up the main part of their ship. Eventually, Prime had to face off against his former mentor, with Sentinel eventually getting the upper hand before Megatron intervened, proposing a truce, but Optimus was in no mood for mercy, and there you go. Cybertron seemed to be destroyed in the destruction of the space bridge, which must have carved Optimus open inside. But he declared that they were adopting the Earth as their new home and would work with the humans in any challenge they faced. But, of course, only more persecution would ensue as Harold Attica's Cemetery Wind was given the mission to track and terminate any hiding Autobots. Prime was apparently on the run from them for several years, and they would eventually corner him and force him to take a different alt mode to evade them before hiding in an abandoned movie theater and slipping into stasis lock from his injuries. This suffering inflicted on them by Cemetery Wind meant that he had to break his ideal of never harming humans, especially after he found out that they were melting down the bodies of his fallen soldiers, including poor Ratchet, to produce their own Transformers. So he killed Fraser. Ta-ta. Before being shot and dragged away by Lockdown, before Lockdown would later stab Optimus with his own sword right through his chest. And after all this, Optimus would leave Earth in search of the mysterious creators. I still don't get why he flew into space like this. Like, did he not have a ship he could take? Like, surely he knew it was too far and that this would happen, that he would eventually run out of energon. And even though he was in stasis here, he managed to freefall all the way to Cybertron, which itself looked like it would be pretty messed up after this. But, I guess not. Anyway, he was revived by Cybertron's atmosphere, and it's here that he met Quintessa and got blasted by her lightning, kicked in by her Infernocons, slapped into chains, and brainwashed into being Nemesis Prime. As Nemesis, he killed 2 Knights of Cybertron.
What are you doing?
And beat the hell out of Bumblebee before hearing Bumblebee's true voice, which brought back his true personality. The Knights of Cybertron then wanted to execute him for his misdeeds, before Cade Yeager activated the talisman and got the Knights on side to fight Quintessa and Megatron. In the Bumblebee movie, he again was seen ordering the evacuation of Cybertron,
Cybertron has fallen.
before single-handedly keeping the Con's forces at bay while his forces left the planet. Before he was surrounded and I guess captured, I don't know, we never see what happened. His message prompted Dropkick and Shatter to call in a large Decepticon armada with a view to destroy Earth before Prime arrived.
Tell them to bring an army.
And then he got stranded on Earth for 7 years, becoming worn down and sullen before the Transwarp Key was activated by, can't remember her name. What's her name? Anyway, he had his ass kicked by Scourge and his Unicron powers and had to watch Bumblebee once again get the worst of it and turn grey. We nearly got eaten by Unicron in this one. Well, at least sucked into the Transwarp portal. He mistook Hydrobot for a Decepticon, but ended up getting rescued by the little Razorbot before apologizing and letting him get back to scraping people's face. I love how at the end as well, after their adventure is done, Razorbot's like, oh my god, my guy's gonna be waking up soon. How's he gonna shave? And Optimus is like,
There goes a true hero.
then it's this mad, crazy race against time dash to get back to the bathroom before this guy gets in there and goes, where's my razor? That's weird. And then just goes about his day. Luckily, he makes it and the world can rest easy again. This has got to be one of the strangest alt modes I've seen. I mean, what self-respecting Cybertronian wants to have his face scraped down some asshole's cheek? I also saw that there was rumored to be a female version of this too, which I guess means there's some little mini-bot out there battling bikini lines and hairy armpits. I find that quite amusing. Anyway, Hydrobot was part of the commercial tie-in campaign for The Last Night and this razor company called Schick. And for some reason in the commercial, after shaving this guy, Optimus went to fist bump the little bot like, yay, job well done, but ended up destroying the side of this dude's house in the process. And then as he turned away, he destroyed his daughter's fucking treehouse, so, But I mean, this guy didn't seem to mind. Look at him, he's like, fuck yeah, Transformer! He got hunted by this guy who wanted his head as a trophy. And then he struggled to ride Grimlock in How to Ride Your Dinobot, and even ended up carrying the hulking Dinobot around. In the Q-Formers cartoon, Optimus was a sentient toy hanging out and chatting to Bee and Lockdown at service stations on Japanese highways.
Rest areas are homosexual hangouts.
For what I understand, they spoke a lot about video games, but Prime also suggested that plushies were a great way to get younger fans interested in the franchise, as well as injecting some more sex appeal, which he visualized with RC in the bath. Oh, and he talked about a guy he saw on TV who could magnetically attract cutlery to his body. Loved randomness. In Legends World, he was just a hero of a fictional show and therefore not real, whereas many of the other bots were and had real jobs and stuff. Then he fell on a guy's car in a Chevrolet commercial, as well as yeeted a trailer full of M&Ms into the Great Blue Yonder after being asked to deliver them. He sang Boom de Yada in... He sang Boom de Yada in a Discovery Channel promo and got a parking ticket when he appeared at a toy fair in 2011. In Transformers the Game, he had his head caved in by Megatron's chain flail, in the Decepticon ending at least, and became a pony in the Fabulous Ponymaker game. He nearly ruined a party for green Play-Doh, yeah, I had to read that twice too, when he accidentally ripped a birthday party sign. Basically, he, Peppa Pig, and the Red Power Ranger, and a couple of others, had to fix the birthday party after a storm came in and wrecked it. And Clumsy Mr. Clumsy Pants over here ripped the sign and then got into a fight with Grimlock. Alright, let's do Aligned Optimus. I won't go into his full origin because most of you already know it. Basically, the last of the 13 Primes to be born, lived through the schism of the Primes, and then re-entered the Well of Sparks to become Orion. Made friends with Megatron, who became jealous that he was bestowed the Allspark, and then threw the Empire into civil war. I'm cutting a few corners, obviously, but you guys already know the story. Then in the Transformers Prime series, he arrived too late to help Cliffjumper fight off Starscream and his group of cons, and had to give a speech at his funeral, only for him to be brought back to life as a Terracon by Megatron's Dark Energon. And then he had to contend with Skyquake, who Megatron had tasked with terminating him. Then he nearly got eaten by Scraplets. Nearly froze to death in the Arctic, if I remember correctly. And couldn't join Wheeljack's welcome party because Primes don't party, apparently. He got zapped with a cattle prod-like device called an Energon Prod, which allowed Soundwave to escape with an Energon Harvester. And then when they found Megatron in stasis, B entered his mind to find that he'd been dreaming about killing Optimus over and over and over and over and over. You got Cybonic Plague in that one too. Yeah, basically they stumbled onto a castaway ship that had crashed and it was full of diseased bots, and Opie got dribbled on by the still potent bioweapon. Oh, one amazing thing that he did, just to break up all the bad things, was that he pledged to rescue Breakdown, yeah, the Decepticon, when he was captured by human outfit Mech. He was paralyzed by Arachnid.
Perhaps he'll adorn the prow of Megatron's warship.
And he came to blows with close friend Ratchet when he tested RoboCrack Synth-N on himself.
Stronger, faster, studlier.
Then he beat Megatron epically in front of a volcano, I might add, with the volcano erupted with dark energon, giving Megsy a turbo boost and allowing him not just to come back into the fight, but come this close to killing him altogether. I mean, Optimus needed to be saved. Then he discovered that Earth was actually a sleeping Unicron and got attacked by a bunch of stone Unicron avatars.
Fuck, oh fuck, the rocks are attacking!
Before making a deal with Megatron to travel to Earth's core and try and extinguish Unicron's life force with, guess what? Is it option A, the Matrix of Leadership? Is it option B, the Matrix of Leadership? C, the Squeaky Banana Fun Toy! So they managed to extinguish Unicron's life force, but it knocked Optimus out cold, robbing him of his memories. I think spell checks changed it. I think it's supposed to say memories. Making him think that he was Orion Pax again. Like he wasn't robbed of his memories like making him think that he was Orion Pax again. Something that Megatron totally didn't take advantage of, filling his head full of junk about how the Autobots were the aggressors in the war, and like look, he was even given the Decepticon logo. Scandalous. Sacrilegious even. Pax would eventually get suspicious though, and found out the truth in the when he was rooting through the Decepticons' databanks one day. Then Mech created a clone of him, and then his new super weapon, the Star Saber, didn't last long as it got shattered by the Dark Star Saber. He came this close to dying when the Decepticons blew up their base in Nevada, and he had to be brought back with the power of the Forge of Optimus Prime, which gave him this upgraded super buff body, which he used to save Ultra Magnus, kick Megatron's ass, and destroy the fortress known as Darkmount. He then ordered the Autobots to attack the Nemesis before B killed Megatron and Prime flew the Nemesis back to Cybertron and resurrected their planet, before heading off to find the ALLSPARK. And then when he returned to Cybertron, he found that Megatron had been possessed by the spirit of Unicron, and he had to merge the ALLSPARK with a matrix to contain Unicron's spark in its container. That meant that he himself had to merge with Cybertron's core to return the energy of the ALLSPARK to it, sacrificing his life in the process. I've said it before, this to me is probably my favorite moment in all of Transformers history. It brings a tear to my eye every time. He got webbed to a tree by Arachnid in the Russian Eagle Moss comics. Then he was called a traitor by his fellow Autobots when he hesitated to kill Megatron in the Titan Prime comics. Then had his mind transferred to this Chinese guy's body. Basically, he got zapped in there with one of Knockout's devices called a neuron refractor. Then he had to fix the Statue of Liberty after it got damaged in a battle with Megatron. And this one's pretty funny. He had to go on a game show called Down and Out where he had to navigate a maze made to look like ancient Egypt. And if he didn't, Breakdown on Knockout would kill a bunch of hostages. Now, although he wasn't the focus of rescue bots, there was still a couple of instances worth talking about in there. Like he got stuck inside a volcano in rescue bots and had to ignite a bunch of energon to blast him and the other bots out of the top of it. He discovered dinosaurs were alive and well on an island and took a T-Rex alt mode to investigate. Discovered that their babies were stuck under all these rocks, and that's why they were causing all the trouble. Insert Jurassic Park reference here. And then when he ran out of energon, he turned into a snarling beast, even going on a rampage through town, before once again being hunted for sport by a big game hunter. Only this time it was Crocodile Dundee. What is it with these guys? This guy lured him into an ice trap where he got frozen. Then he got picked up by these, what are flying mask-wearing things that generated this force field? Anyway, yeah, moving on. In Transformers Go, he took the alt mode of a bullet train and a dragon. And again, with the flying fucking trains, I feel like the element of disguise has kind of gone out the window a little. But I guess that's why he has the dragon, because that'll blend in much better. Anyway, the dragon mode got its ass handed to him by Dragotron. He had to combine with the sword bots into this to beat him. Okay, on to Robots in Disguise, the 2015 one, where at first he was revered with statues of him all around the place. But as a new High Council took governance, they seemed to sway public opinion towards blaming him for the war and the destruction that was wrought on their planet. And eventually, they blacklisted him altogether. I mean, after everything he had done in Transformers Prime, to have his legacy tarnished like this was criminal. So what had actually happened after he had rejoined the Well of Sparks at the end of Transformers Prime was that he was whisked away by the Primes to the realm of the Primes to train to fight the looming threat of Megatronus. He did persuade the Primes to give him some of their power, which gave him another cool look and a really cool body, but even that wasn't enough to beat Galvatronus, and he got slapped up pretty good. At first, at least, until Prime used his Decepticon Hunter to destroy Megatronus' Spark Fuser before he could get his hands on the Allspark, and that seemed to turn the tide and allowed Grimlock into the fight and the other Autobots to drop the arm of Lady Liberty on him. Oh yeah, and then gradually shatter his body and vaporize him with the combined power of their Decepticon Hunter weapons. After all this, he decided to stay on Earth as an equal to the other Autobots, so as no longer as leader. So he lost his rank, and on top of that, the Primes took all their power back in a process that was highly dangerous and could have killed him. And then on top of that, it turns out that they took too much power back and left him severely weakened.
I think I'm going to lie in a hammock for several days.
He got stranded in the Arctic again. You know what? I'm starting to think that kid's never going to get his snowball.
The pain of broken promises is one we all must learn.
Then he was knocked off a cliff by a shitload of falling ice, which was actually tossed down at them by this hissing man-bear pig bot. What is this? Who is this? Oh, Polar Claw? Okay, onto some video games. He allowed himself to be captured in War for Cybertron to infiltrate a prison facility in Kaon, and he had to be saved from execution by air raid. And then during the boss battle with Shockwave, he took a shot meant for Zeta Prime, not knowing that Zeta was already on the speedy train to death's door, so he basically took this bullet for nothing. He was fine though, as shortly after the High Council gave him the title of Prime, and shortly after that he was riding space slugs to the planet's core where he would get the Matrix. In Fall of Cybertron, Megatron blamed him for the dying of the planet, when it was Megs that poisoned the core of Cybertron with Dark Energon in the previous game. And of course, he had to watch Bumblebee throw himself in front of a blaster shot that was meant for him.
Bumblebee!
He was left in critical condition after a con attack in Decepticon Strike, but Alpha Trion brought him back all buff and stuff, so he's fine. But then he free fell through the Earth's atmosphere after trying to stop an asteroid made of Dark Energon in the Transformers Prime game. Where does this game fit in the order of this continuity? So you've got War for Cybertron, then Fall of Cybertron, then Transformers Prime, then 2015 Robots in Disguise, right? So where does this one go? As a result, he got buried in Dark Energon debris before the Prime incarnation of Thunderwing showed up, wanting to destroy the Matrix of Leadership to please his master, UNICRON. Then Thunderwing was blasted to pieces by the Nemesis, so the Autobots had to collect the missing pieces before the Cons could reassemble him and use him for their purposes. In one battle for one of the pieces, Prime got buried alive again, and they lost the piece of Thunderwing, which meant that Prime had to fight and defeat the Behemoth. It's a shame that I missed this one. Let me know if it was any good. I'm currently playing Rise of the Darkspark. I'll start posting the vids probably in the autumn, when hopefully it'll tie in with some news on Transformers Reactivate. If we ever get any news on Transformers Reactivate, that is. What about the animated version of the character? Well, just a quick side note fact, this incarnation was given the name Optimus by Cup when he was at boot camp because he was so happy and optimistic. Like Optimus. Did you see? Optimistic? Isn't that crazy? Anyway, whilst at boot camp, he was killed in a battle simulation, but all the same managed to score higher than any other recruit in Autobot history. Then there was Elita Gate, where he had to abandon Elita 1 when an unauthorized sortie led them into a conflict with a bunch of giant spiders. Basically, she fell into a hole, and seeing that the odds of survival were really low, he dragged Sentinel away and stopped him from saving her. Understandably, this was something that ripped both characters up inside, and created a grudge between the two that lasted over 1,000 years, and led to Optimus being kicked out of the Academy, destroying his dream of becoming an elite guard. Ultra Magnus, who don't forget was Optimus' superior in this continuity, gave him a shitbox of a ship, and he assembled a crew of fellow losers and washouts and failures, including Bumblebee, Bulkhead, and Prowl, and headed off to Earth. Anyway, OP would later find out that Elita 1 wasn't dead, but had been mutated into Black Arachnia.
Elita 1?
It's Black Arachnia now.
And when he tried to persuade her to come back to the Autobots, she told him she would never trust him again, injected him full of poison, and escaped. Not before aging Seri Sumdak and throwing her off a roof, though. Get dropped, Benjamin Button! And in the end, Optimus realized that he'd failed her not once, but twice. Then there was this whole thing about whether her mutation could be reversed or not, and she turned a criminal called Wasp into a techno-organic bot that we know as Waspinator, in order to carry out experiments to try and find a way of changing herself back. And long story short, she ended up sacrificing herself to save both Optimus and Sentinel when the Waspinator blew up and destroyed half of this island. Anyway, their discovery of the ALLSPARK made them a target for the Decepticons, so he was knocked offline by Starscream but was revived by new Humi friend Sari Sumdak literally 1 minute later. He was captured by an electromagnet, then had to watch Bee and Prowl play Twister, which must have been hella weird, when a bunch of dinosaur animatronics came to life, giving us the animated incarnation of the Dinobots. Optimus agreed with this guy's plan of having them melted down. Of course, he didn't realize that they had become sentient at this point, and of course, they escaped and were moved to live on Dinobot Island by Prowl. And Megatron's resurrection meant him getting the crap beaten out of him, especially when Megatron put the ALLSPARK into his own body and used it as a weapon against him. Then Sentinel wanted him strung up for high treason, before having to beg Optimus to help him when his body got stolen. That was his actual laugh. I love it. He helped clear trash from the city of Detroit during a garbage dispute in an effort to mend strained Autobot-human relations. Then Swindle messed him up good with a machine to freeze any electronic machines within its range. What's happened? And then he found out that Sentinel, who was, don't forget, his best friend at one point, was committing treason. Basically, he'd cut this deal with Lockdown, where Lockdown would go out and capture Decepticons, and Sentinel would take the credit for it. And in return, Sentinel would turn a blind eye to Lockdown's activities and give him technology and ship parts. But Optimus decided not to tell anyone about the betrayal. But he did tell Sentinel that one day he would settle the score with him. Now, I don't know what you guys think about Transformers Animated, but I gotta say that this dynamic between Sentinel, Optimus, Elita 1, not really seen anything like that in Transformers before. Not done in this way, anyway. Anyway, on a lighter note, if you remember that episode of G1 where Magnus, Springer, RC, and Hot Rod, I think it was, became human, well, in Animated it was Optimus's turn.
Why the ALLSPARK?
Now, it was weird because it was Christmas and he drank some oil nog that had been spiked by Soundwave, and yeah, he suddenly woke up like this. I love how they picture some of these characters. Like, look at Ratchet. You looking at my eye? Oh, if you get that reference, by the way, then you've seen some of the obscure ones, like Kudos. Bumblebee's a small child? And Prowl? When I first saw it, I was like, oh, this better not be another Dream episode. I hate those. And it kind of was, actually. It turned out that he was in a holodeck type thing, and it was all a simulation to keep their minds busy, while Soundwave tried to reprogram them as Decepticons. There's some pretty funny stuff in this episode. Like, they get to experience the joys of gluttonous overeating and nearly shitting yourself to death, only to gluttonously overeat again. And Optimus is like, Autobots, let's just go. At one point, he was questioned by school kids, and he had to explain some of the annoying minutiae that, well, let's face it, you know, that we've all wondered about. Like, where does his head go and how does he see when he turns into truck mode, and where his trailer goes. Now, he didn't actually give a proper explanation to this one, but I have seen one frankly batshit explanation called subspace shunting. And in terms of bullshit plot devices, it's up there with mass shifting, trust me. Should I spend a minute talking about this? Yeah, go on, let's do it. So the theory with subspace shunting, if I can say the words, is that there are subspace storage pockets in the extra dimension known as unspace. Think about it as like a locker that's outside of space and time that you can just teleport stuff out of whenever you want via some kind of tether. So anytime you see something like this, that's come from another dimension. Really handy for this to work in real life, wouldn't it? Like if it suddenly started raining, you can stick your hand up in the air and you'd be like, umbrella! As long as the tether doesn't mess up, obviously, and you end up with a big dildo. He was falsely accused of nearly running over a kid in the Prime Suspect novel. And then Isaac Sumdak's latest gizmo blasted him into another dimension, sending him to interdimensional megacity Axiom Nexus, where he was promptly arrested. Luckily, it didn't send him to the middle of butt-fucking space or into a black hole or something. Anyway, he had to watch his whole crew battered by Megatron in the cool comics until he managed to blast him out of an airlock. And later, Opie was shredded by Megatron's fusion cannon, which he'd powered up using a fragment of the ALLSPARK. Oh yeah, and then he ran him through with the sword as well. Have I done EARTHSPARK already? Because he had to contend with Mandroid and his army of Arachnomechs in that one, and he had his arm stolen by Novastorm and Skywarp before he got mind-controlled by Mandroid and had to have his energon drained with Mandroid's control spear to break Mandroid's grasp. Okay, jumping back in time a little bit, we've got 2001 RID, where he had a brother-like relationship with Ultra Magnus until once again animosity arose between them when Optimus was chosen to bear the Matrix. It's a real shame, because they were both created by Alpha Trion, they were raised together, and they went through the Cybertronian civils together. Like, it couldn't really get much closer. Anyway, after setting up his command on Earth, he was captured and beaten while bound by Megatron, and he got scanned by a protoform which resulted in the creation of Skurd. I think it was originally an Autobot protoform too. In one ep, he had to fight off not just the cons, but also Ultra Magnus, who force combined with him into Omega Prime, hoping to get control of the Matrix that way, but Optimus managed to retain enough control to use their combined form to fight off the cons and keep the Matrix. Even in this combined form of Omega Prime though, he was unable to stop Fortress Maximus from running amok, and he was swamped in lava when Galvatron flooded a tunnel with the rocky hot sauce. Now, we haven't touched on Armada yet, where he was betrayed by Sideways, who stole the Star Saber to deliver it to the cons, or even worse actually, to reactivate Unicron. Yeah, Sideways was kind of a con artist who at first seemed to be helping out the Autobots, but soon was revealed to be working solely in his own interest, as he realized he could call on the power of Unicron to make himself almost invincible. Oh, and he has this sort of phase mode that I think allows him to shapeshift into any shape he wants, if just in case you're wondering what this purple blob is. And then he was saddened to see that his old friend Scavenger had left the Autobots and become a mercenary, and was selling his services to the Decepticons. He turned out to be a double agent though, and a good guy all along. He watched Smokescreen die in front of him after a battle over the Requiem Blaster, but then, to stop the cons from using their devastating Hydra Cannon on Earth, he used the power of the Matrix to stop the massive Death Star beam, but got blasted to dust in the process. Pretty moving moment, this one. Especially as initially all the humans are laughing and happy because of his victory, not realizing that he's had to give his life and that this is about to happen. He was brought back to life by the Minicons though, but promptly pulled through a portal to fight another version of Nemesis on this nightmare horror planet, before joining forces with Galvatron to fight Unicron. It's an interesting moment here as they arrive at Unicron's heart, where Unicron takes the shape of Sideways to suggest to Optimus that the only difference between him and Galvatron is the matrix of leadership, and that Optimus actually loves the thrill of the fight as much as his counterpart.
You must admit you love the smell of battle.
This seemed to strike a chord with Optimus and hit him pretty hard and make him question himself for a second or two. Anyway, they defeated Unicron in an event that I'll talk about more when I do a video of all the times Opie and Megs have teamed up, after which Prime again wondered if Unicron was right about him, and rather than stay and help the Transformers rebuild, he jetted off into space to contemplate and meditate, you know, who the fuck knows what. He would of course return in Transformers Energon, where he found out that Megatron was still alive, somehow reborn through the power of Energon.
I am back.
He was nearly assassinated by Starscream, also resurrected, and now with ghost power, and working for Alpha Q, he had to fight Unicron, also resurrected somehow, and he had to watch Wing Dagger and Inferno die, as well as the destruction of Blizzard Planet and Circuit Planet. This all went on until a beam of energy sent by Primus himself made Optimus grow to a Unicron-like size, and he was finally able to take on the Uncreator on equal terms. Once he was brought back to his normal size, he found out that Unicron wasn't dead, it was just his physical body that had been destroyed. He was exposed to toxic energon gas and collapsed. He then had to grow to gargantuan proportions again to stop Cybertron smushing into every planet it came close to as it free floated through the galaxy. And just as everyone started to breathe a sigh of relief, like, phew, he saved the day again, he lost his shit and started to trash the planet, as it turned out that the energy he used to supersize himself was not from Primus but from Unicron, which he would later reflect that the evil power of the Dark God flowed through all Transformers. I thought it was pretty interesting. Anyway, just after things had seemingly calmed down, Galvatron grew to titanic proportions too, causing Optimus to grow to titanic proportions too, to duke it out with him. And this is a pretty funny battle, you know, like with them crushing each other's heads, and like, oh my god. In the final part of the Unicron trilogy, Transformers Cybertron, he frequently butted heads with Wing Saber, who grew tired of his command and then left the ranks of the Autobots. And then he had to find the long-lost Cyberplanet keys to enable him to close a black hole that threatened the whole of the universe. Then he later faced the loss of another mentor of his, the time-traveling Vector Prime, as his body was disintegrated by the black hole.
How come I'm crying?
Now, in Transformers Cyberverse, not only was the young Optimus, I'm not sure if he was actually called Orion Pax in this one, but not only were they friends, he would also help write his speeches, helping him gain popularity as his rallies became more and more successful. Of course, this was all before the war, and Megatron's goals started to become darker, ultimately leading to the murder of all the High Counselors, apart from Alpha Trion, who would later die after giving Optimus the Matrix. So feeling like he was implicated and somehow contributed to all their deaths would mean that Optimus carried this huge guilt for his involvement in the lead up to it. Later, he was attacked by bugs, simply referred to as cave monsters. Rather than kill them and take their energon, he ordered that the crew of the Ark be placed in stasis to conserve energy. Once on Earth, he had to stop the Cons Planet Smasher. Then he had to fight Grimlock after he went nuts on Wheeljack's new hyperfuel. Then Megatron took Hot Rod hostage and told Prime to give up his own life in exchange, which he agreed to. After which Hot Rod just leaves, which renders the whole situation pointless.
I'll let myself out.
So Optimus is like, okay, bye. He was overpowered and taken hostage by Skybite, who was stronger than usual because of this spark armor given to him by Starscream. So yeah, Cyberverse had this thing where bots could use the power of the ALLSPARK to take components from non-sentient machinery to augment themselves. And it made them pretty powerful. As I said, Skybite was suddenly able to overpower Optimus, and Jetfire was able to at least intimidate Megatron. But one that horrifies me is when Starscream ordered his domesticated scraplets to almost eat Optimus alive, ripping chunks out of him to expose the matrix in his chest. Something about this image is just not right. Prowl took a bullet for him, and then the Quintessons managed to take control of Cybertron by trapping the Cybertronians in a virtual reality illusion of a parade with Optimus as its Grand Marshal. Then once they were defeated, he had to face off against the perfect Decepticons, basically super soldiers from another dimension created by an even more evil version of Megatron, who incidentally killed his universe's version of Prime. These guys were initially non-thinking drones, apart from one who developed a personality and became known as Tarn. Anyway, he Matrix beam clashed with the other Megatron and just about got away with it. It really seemed like Megsy was the most powerful of the two, but Windblade sabotaged the alternate Matrix and all was good in Good Town. Then, just as he was about to finally sign the peace treaty to end the war, he got frozen in time before the super soldiers turned up again from the multiverse, now led by Tarn. Optimus challenged him to a one-on-one, but he had to fight through hordes of the super soldiers first and quickly grew tired.
That's fine. 3 more!
Tarn would have killed him had it not been for all the plot armor and the timely arrival of the Autobots. Tarn was defeated by Soundwave before Optimus decided to step down as leader.
I will enjoy myself.
He got graffitied in the Ghostbusters crossover comic, and he fell into an Energon pool in the 2019 IDW continuity. This was back when he and Megatron were friends and went on a sightseeing trip into orbit together, and they free fell back down for the shits and gigs, using only these decelerators to stop them crashing into the ground. Only Orion's failed, but luckily there was this pool beneath them. Anyway, he would later have to fend off a sea of rustworms, but you know what? This comic was mainly more about the origins and the rise of the Decepticons, and then the battle against Exarchon. He got a hole blown through his chest as Megatron sent him to the realm of the dead, and he needed to be guided back by the voice for Alpha Trion. Then he burst out of Ultra Magnus's body. Yeah, Ultra Magnus was an Autobot god in this one and took Optimus into himself to repair him. And then when he got out, he punched Megatron into the sun. The loss of Ultra Magnus and Siege rocked the Autobots' faith in Prime. Moonracer died in his arms after being attacked by the Sparkless. The one that hit me the most from the War for Cybertron trilogy was seeing Elita 1's dead body in the snow. Just lying there in the snow, dead. Should we do some unofficial, like, fan stuff? Like, non-canon fan stuff? Yeah, let's do that. His dad wouldn't give him any credit for an A on a math test in Robot Chicken. Yeah, his dad was proper abusive in this one. I guess it fits in with the theme of this video, I suppose. He had to serve jury duty, and his trailer also cheated on him. Yeah, one time he needed it, and it didn't show up, and then it cuts, and it's in bed with this guy. Oh my god. And then in this super weird sketch, he had his prostate checked by Ratchet. Before you see him there lying in bed dying of cancer. The whole thing turned out to be a warning from the Health Board of America or whatever to warn the audience of the dangers of not having their prostates checked. Super weird. Internet legend the fuck boom put the G1 incarnation and the movie incarnation up against each other before they were stopped by, who is this? Universe? Is this Universe Optimus Prime? So they both joined up and beat the crap out of him, ripping off his arm and cutting his head off. Then he danced, I guess you'd call this. And look, Soundwave is doing the slab squat. Then Optimus got squashed by a hydraulic press, also got put in a blender and a microwave. Where did they find a microwave big enough would be my question. But way worse than all that, he had to react to himself in the Transformers Last Night trailer. And I guess he didn't like it because he smashed up his computer screen. That's brilliant. Okay, peoples, I'm going to have to leave that there. I guess if there is a point to this video, it's just to highlight how much he's been made to suffer. And the reason that they do that is because the writers know that we care so much about the character that any jeopardy he's put in will draw you into whatever movie or situation. You know what I mean, right? So here's to 40 more years of Optimus. If anyone tried counting the deaths, it's kind of tricky because you have to define what constitutes as a death. You know, most of the time, this guy's brought back pretty quickly. So was he really dead in the first place? My logic was any time his body and mind dies counts, even if he's brought back pretty quickly afterwards. Ones like the Marvel decapitation didn't count for me because Shockwave kept his consciousness alive. Same applies to the IDW death where he uploaded his consciousness into his trailer. It didn't count whenever he was killed in a simulation, or the time where the other Megatron killed the alternate version of him. But all that considered, I made it 17 deaths, which is actually a lot less than I thought it was going to be. Could be that I missed some. In fact, if you want another video looking in detail at every single one of Optimus' deaths, let me know in the comments below. All right. It has been a long one, so thank you very much for spending this time with me. Make sure you subscribe for more. I think I might do most for... Oops. Shit, microphone. Microphone's had enough. I think I might do most ferocious rivalries in Transformers next, or maybe try to list every bot that switched sides. I'll be ranking all the feature-length movies for the members, as well as ranking the Decepticon factions in terms of powers. So make sure you're checking out the memberships. Thank you again for all the support, and I will see you very soon for the next one. Thanks again for watching, and cheerio, bye!